that you, Brett?
It is.
Good to see you. Welcome, Brett. Our new Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, right there. You must be getting so tired of hearing that. I'm sorry. Tonight's talk is, I believe it's the 8th in this series, a seemingly endless series on Jhana. And this is a concluding talk, pardon me?
The 8th in our 4-part series.
Yeah. Impermanence always intervenes in these things. And I will be giving the last talk in this series on Saturday, but on this same sutta. So there'll be 2 talks on this sutta. And I won't be reading the introduction. And the introduction to this sutta is the same for most of the suttas on jhana, simply because it gives a very detailed explanation as to why the Buddha taught the meditation method he taught, and the whole purpose of teaching these different suttas on jhana. And again, there's no reason to go over that again, but I encourage you to read it, because there's a lot of information in there that actually relates to next week's talks, which will be on the Anupada Sutta, the sutta where the Buddha describes in detail his own search for awakening, the things he discovered that weren't useful or skillful to develop, and those that were. And a meditation practice that's focused solely on concentration is one of the primary things that he discovered. So this is the Anapanasati Sutta, subtitle, Ending Fabrications One After Another. On one occasion, the Buddha was staying at Savatthi in Jita's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. He addressed those gathered. Friends, Venerable Sariputta is wise. I gotta interrupt. Everybody knows who Sariputta is. Sariputta is known as one of the Buddha's chief disciples. Him and Moggallana came to the Buddha very early in his teaching career. You remember the story that I taught on Sariputta and Moggallana. Sariputta very quickly studied with the Buddha and awakened within about 2 weeks of joining the Buddhist sangha. And throughout the Buddha's teaching career, he was one of the most significant monks. And in this sutta, the Buddha uses Sariputta as an example of how to do jhana. Friends, Venerable Sariputta is wise. Sariputta is of great, deep, and penetrating discernment. For 2 weeks, Sariputta, he's describing when Sariputta first came to him. For 2 weeks, Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and unskillful mental qualities, gained profound insight into those unskillful mental qualities, one after another. So that's a significant line right there. It's this idea that the Buddha's teaching of recognizing unskillful mental qualities rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, one after another, is lost if we don't use a meditation practice focused on deepening concentration. If it's for some other reason, we're not even looking for these things. And so there's no way to recognize them and abandon them one after another. Sariputta entered and remained in the first jhana. This first jhana is characterized by rapture born of seclusion. It is accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. So that first jhana, again, just to make the point, every time that we engage in shamatha vipassana meditation, the way it's described, we are entering into these jhanas, at least the first 3. And so this first jhana is simply rapture or a joyful focus born of that very seclusion that we do when we first disentangle from the world, find our cushion or our meditation spot, close our eyes, and become mindful of the sensation of breathing. That's the establishment of seclusion. It's the establishment of the first jhana. And in that first level of meditative absorption, our first level of concentration, there is directed thought and evaluation. In other words, we are directing our thinking as to what to do, and we'll probably find ourselves distracted by other thoughts that are occurring. And in this case, thoughts and feelings are the same thing. And evaluation is simply what we almost compulsively do in relation to feelings and thoughts arising. We judge them. We put a value judgment on whether I like it or I don't like the feeling or the thought, or we value judge our practice. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it wrong. I can't possibly do this. I can't stand this. All of that is part of evaluation. And it's a common part of every meditator. The Buddha teaches that. That's part of the first jhana. But as we continue, that minor level of concentration and still distracted mind falls away as we continue. The Buddha continues, the qualities present in the first jhana, directed thought, evaluation, rapture, pleasure, and this is a longer list than the Buddha teaches in any of the other suttas on jhana, but remember he's using Sariputta as an example, and also remember this is an instruction on how to meditate. It's what to be mindful of, and to be mindful of as fabrication and let them go one after another. Directed thought, evaluation, rapture, pleasure, concentration, contact, feeling, perception, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Notice there's no value placed on some of these things that could be seen as more skillful and less skillful. They're just present, and they're to be mindful of arising and passing away one after another. If there was a reason to exaggerate or accentuate any one of these qualities, the Buddha would be teaching it here, wouldn't he? Recognize when you're in equanimity and hold on to it. That's not part of jhana practice, and it's not part of a meditation practice. Equanimity is the ultimate goal of a mind and a body engaged in this Dhamma practice, but it's not something to embellish in any way. It's simply a consequence of a well-focused Dhamma practice. I'm going to skip over some of my commentary. The Buddha continues. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the first jhana. In other words, they're all part of every human being's quality of mind, no matter where you are. They're present. Simply recognize the impermanent nature of each one of them, the fabricated nature of each one of them. Come back to the sensation of breathing. He noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. Excuse me. Having entered in the first jhana, rapture born of seclusion and accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regard to these qualities. He was simply present with them. And this leads to the next jhana of freeing himself and ourselves of evaluating these. Sariputta remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Any barriers. In other words, if we start putting qualities, good or bad, on any of these normal states of mind, we're going to become distracted by that. Using Sariputta as the example, he recognized them arising and passing away, but he was free of any attraction or aversion to any of them, and simply continued his concentration practice, his jhana practice. Again, I'll skip over my commentaries. The Buddha continues, having entered into the first jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. How important is that? So many people, in fact, a lot of meditation is taught that the sole goal is to enter that first jhana, to find a pleasant place where we're kind of okay with what we're doing. The Buddha teaches, and he's using Sariputta as an example, to recognize that is simply a preliminary level of meditative absorption, and to understand there is a deeper level. Having entered into the first jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this Eightfold Path and realized deeper concentration. The Buddha simply explaining that. Now he's going to explain to us how Sariputta developed that deeper concentration. Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and from unskillful mental qualities, in other words, he's continuing his shamatha vipassana meditation, with the stilling of directed thought and evaluations, entered and remained in the second jhana. This isn't the same as having them completely calmed, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But there's a sutta that I taught last week, where Ananda is teaching a householder the process of going from stilling these qualities to actually calming these qualities. But here the Buddha is teaching that Sariputta has stilled the qualities of directed thought and evaluation, and from doing so, with no other method except being mindful of the breath in the body, he entered and remained into the second jhana, the second level of meditative absorption. The Buddha continues, this second jhana is characterized as rapture and pleasure born of concentration. Again, nothing extraordinary here, is it? Except in the sense that this is all extraordinary teachings. We first begin our meditation practice, become mindful of the breath in the body, and notice the pleasure of simple seclusion, of simply being disentangled from the world. And as we continue our meditation practice, being mindful of the breath in the body, we now notice that the directed thought and evaluation has fallen away. And it might just be for a moment. Notice that there's no time frame put on any of it. In other words, the Buddha doesn't say, well, the first jhana, you got to do this for 6 hours or 60 years or endless lifetimes. We pass through these gracefully and naturally as a consequence of having a practice, having a right meditation practice. And as we continue from the rapture and joy of seclusion and directed thought and evaluation, and we continue our meditation practice, being mindful of the breath in the body, we recognize a deeper level of concentration, and that's simply being mindful that we are becoming well concentrated. How do we know it? Because at least in this moment, there's no directed thought or evaluation. We're simply engaged with our breath in the body. And again, remember, there's no time frame in this. The simple recognition that in this moment I am well concentrated on my breath and nothing else. You are now in the second jhana. And each and every one of us has had that experience, correct? Has anyone not? And it's okay to admit that you didn't, but I would be surprised if you had, because it's common.
Brief.
Initially, it's brief, yes. In fact, yes, and it's brief more or less in all of our Dhamma practice. In other words, as we continue to deepen our practice, we will more quickly get to the third jhana that I'll describe right now. In fact, I think I talked about this last Saturday, maybe. When I think about the experience of Dhamma, of meditation, while I'm meditating, it's usually simply a recognition that this is a pleasant abiding. I recognize that this is where I'm at, and that happens rather quickly. But it took me a while, it took me a dedicated practice to get to that point where meditation is basically a pleasant abiding. Let me go back one line just to keep this in context. This second jhana is characterized as rapture and pleasure born of concentration. The Buddha continues, the mind united in the body, the whole purpose of the Buddha's entire Dhamma practice can be said to be unite the mind in the body and keep it there. The mind united in the body, free of directed thought and evaluation, and internal assurance. A nice line. An internal assurance. What does it mean? It means that we know this is bearing fruit. How do we know? Because we're having the direct experience of it. In this same sentence, the Buddha said, the mind is united in the body. When a mind is united in the body, it can know that it's having a direct experience of concentration deepening. And there is an internal assurance, isn't it? We know that we're doing something that's actually bearing fruit. It's not something that's ambiguous. It's not something that has to be validated by another teacher or something outside of ourselves, or the number of times that we do it or the length of time. The knowing that there's benefit here is an internal knowing, an internal assurance. We simply know it by having the experience and having the framework to recognize the experience. Is that clear? Have you all had that experience of this internal assurance that you feel like you're doing something that's of value? Anyone not? And again, I would really appreciate if you have it, to have a discussion on it. I don't think you would, because you're all engaging in right meditation. Okay. The mind united in the body, free of directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. The qualities present in the second jhana, internal assurance, directed thought, evaluation, rapture, pleasure, concentration, contact, feeling, perception, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention, were recognized one after another. In other words, Sariputta is not clinging after any of these and not craving for more of any of these experiences or developing aversion for certain ones. He simply recognized this is the quality of a human mind, seeking deeper levels of concentration. We recognize them one after another.
The list there doesn't seem to be any order
Yeah,
in
no
the list. It
priorities.
just goes through
And there isn't, is there?
all of these
It's like
things
stream
come
of
up.
consciousness. It's random.
Yes, and obviously you could expand this list infinitely, couldn't you?
Mhm.
Thinking about the cat or whatever you want to put in here. And so the Buddha's practicing restraint here and saying these are common things that everybody's going to experience. And Sariputta did too. He recognized them one after another. Another appellation you could put is Sariputta recognized the impermanence of these one after another, because each and every one of them are fleeting. It's a remarkable sutta in that way, in the scope that it's covering. Sariputta, wise of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the second jhana. Even the arising, the establishment, and the passing away is important in this sutta, and even in our own recognition, because the establishment is usually momentary, but it's important to recognize that if we're distracted by something, any one of these qualities or anything else that arises, it's because of our own intention to establish it as this is me, this is mine, this is who I am in that moment. An aspect of I-making. He noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. Having entered in the second jhana, rapture born of concentration, free from directed thought and evaluation, Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Again, he's pointing out he's independent of even clinging to his own thoughts. He's free of any fabrication. Remember, he's using Sariputta as an example, who's now an awakened human being. Skipping over my commentary. The Buddha continues, having entered into the second jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. Sariputta, secluded from sensuality and from unskillful mental qualities, with the fading of rapture and remaining equanimous, mindful, and alert, an important line here, phrase, sensitive to pleasure. So this is different than being driven by sensuality and the need for constant sensory distraction. It means that our minds have quieted enough that we can be sensitive to what's occurring in the body. It's another way of saying the mind is now united in the body and not distracted out of the body by the need for constant sensory stimulation. Do you see the clear distinction there?
That's from the Anapanasati.
Exactly. And actually the Satipatthana Sutta. And
Is that like being able to receive the pleasure but not being distracted by it?
yeah, that's right. And the Buddha will explain that in better detail than I can. Right now, I love this sutta. Can you tell? Remaining equanimous, mindful, and alert, sensitive to pleasure in the body, entered and remained in the third jhana. This third jhana is characterized by the noble ones, meaning awakened ones, as equanimous, mindful, resting in a pleasant abiding. If you weren't sensitive to the body, you wouldn't know that you are in this pleasant abiding. And notice there's no clinging to it. There's no attraction towards it. With right meditation, it's simply a development, free of any eye-making, free of any conceit, free of any fabrication, that leads to this pleasant abiding. And because it's free of any fabrication, It's free of any debt associated with that, meaning the debt of continued craving and clinging. It's free of the debt of continued ignorance. Because the mind is now united in the body, it's not craving after or clinging to anything. It's simply a pleasant abiding. And by the way, this is the third jhana, but it's also a description of a human being who has fully developed the Eightfold Path and become rightly self-awakened. Their entire life is resting in that pleasant abiding. We'll get to that. Pretty good thing to try to develop, isn't it? Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the third jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. Having entered in the third jhana, equanimous, a pleasant abiding, the qualities of concentration, sensory contact, feelings, perceptions, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. They simply arose and passed away. Again, no order to this. There's not a hierarchy in these mental qualities. Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regard to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. That last sentence is again a description of ever-deepening concentration, isn't it? It's a very apt description of jhana, if you want to try to remember what does jhana mean. It's that, free of attraction or aversion to anything that's occurring in a meditation practice that's focused on deepening concentration. Doesn't matter what's occurring, I'm simply here to deepen my concentration. And this is how all of these talks are so valuable in helping us keep focused on the purpose of meditation within the framework. The Buddha continues, having entered in the third jhana, Sariputta understood there is yet deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. So even when we've gotten to that point of a pleasant abiding, it's important to recognize there's further to go. We can take our concentration to another deeper level. Furthermore, with the abandoning of joy and distress and with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, Sariputta entered and remained in the fourth jhana. The fourth jhana is characterized by the purity of equanimity and refined mindfulness. There is no evaluation regarding pleasure or pain. Sariputta, wise, of great, deep, and penetrating discernment, clearly saw the arising, the establishment, and the passing away of these mental qualities present in the fourth jhana. He noticed how these qualities arose, how they came into play, and how they vanished. How did they come into play? By fabrication. Having entered in the fourth jhana, established in equanimity, abandoning even evaluating pleasure and pain, internal calm, a pleasant abiding, the qualities of concentration, sensory contact, feelings, perceptions, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regards to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. There's just a pleasant abiding. Once we establish that on our cushion, at ever-deepening levels, we're able to now take that pleasant abiding and bring it into the mundane aspects of our life as our life unfolds, one event after another. So do you see how that ever-deepening concentration supports the complete integration of the Eightfold Path? And how it leads to a recognition, and every one of us, I think, has talked about this, recognizing once we've started developing a practice, that it's working, that we find ourselves in situations that would have been upsetting or frustrating or distracting, and we're able to remain, at least have some measure of calm. Correct? Every one of you has had that? As we deepen our meditation practice and deepen our recognition of it actually occurring, we're locking in the practice. We're telling ourselves there's deeper concentration, just as the Buddha's teaching here. And as we recognize it, we're able to bring it off our cushion. If it goes unrecognized, if it's not part of our experience, there's no way that it can chip away at those fabrications, can it? Recognition of the practice bearing fruit is as important as the practice itself, is what I'm saying and what the Buddha is saying. This is my comment here, and I'm going to read it. The fourth jhana is simply a deepening level of concentration and resulting in pleasant abiding that remains at peace no matter what arises. It's like that last instruction, to notice the quality of your mind, be at peace with the quality of your mind. That relates to the fourth foundation of mindfulness, and it relates to the fourth jhana. This pleasant abiding is the defining characteristic of a well-concentrated mind having integrated the entire Eightfold Path. The Buddha's words, having entered into the fourth jhana, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued the path and realized there is deeper concentration. So even with that pleasant abiding, this relates to a question I got maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago from an online student. He said, why did the Buddha keep meditating after he awakened? And nobody had ever asked me that. And it kind of put me back on my heels. I had to think about it a little bit. And of course, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he? Because in that way, you can say that there is a measure of infinite consciousness, meaning there's always a level of deepening concentration. Why wouldn't you? My comments here, and this will be important as it leads to the rest of the sutta. Sariputta studied with some of the same teachers Siddhartha had, and now realized that these other dharmas only continue a mind disengaged from its body and continuing self-referential fabrications, supporting ongoing ignorance of Four Noble Truths by establishing a self in imaginary non-physical realms. These non-physical realms I'll mention in just a few moments. There's a subtle aspect of asceticism in this desire to establish yourself in non-physical realms. It's a desire of who you are, a mind united in the body, anytime we try to do that. Excuse me. And that was a common practice during the Buddha's time, taught by some of the most famous teachers during his time, and taught by some of the most famous teachers of our time, to strive for these establishment in non-physical realities or non-physical realms, including the establishment of yourself as nothing in nothingness, or the establishment of emptiness, or the establishment of an inner Buddha nature. Those are all aspects of striving for establishment in non-physical realms that are a subtle form of asceticism that the Buddhists practiced, mastered, and rejected. And it's simply because, for that reason, they're very subtle but very powerful distractions. And they're seen as achievements in a lot of different meditation practices, again, during the Buddha's time and in our time. The following part of the Buddha's narrative describes Sariputta recognizing and abandoning these fabricated states just as he had previously, one after another. And notice the similarities to modern Buddhist doctrines such as emptiness, nothingness, no self, non-duality is a big one today. Buddha nature, interdependence, interconnectedness, interbeing, unity consciousness, and many other fabricated self-referential views that ignore the Four Noble Truths and simply perpetuate that ignorance. The Buddha continues. Furthermore, Sariputta abandoned self-identification with physical form, abandoned self-identification with external forms, with perceptions of aversion. The perceptions of aversion disappeared. Now Sariputta perceives a dimension of infinite space. Now, this is an instruction that this is something we should continue as part of jhana practice. He's using Sariputta's experience as an example of this is something else that is simply fabricated and should be recognize one after another as another fabricated impermanent state. A dimension of impermanent space. Sariputta entered and remained in this dimension of infinite space. The qualities present in a dimension of infinite space, and then all the rest of these that were common at the time and still common today. The perception of the dimension of infinite space, the dimension of infinite concentration, the dimension of ongoing sensory contact, feelings, perceptions, intention, consciousness, desire, decision, persistence, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention were recognized one after another. And then similarly in this sutta, with the dimensions of nothingness, infinite consciousness, and neither perception nor non-perception. He noticed how these qualities arose, the Buddha's words, he noticed how these qualities arose, came into play, and vanished. So these other non-physical realms or qualities are just as fabricated and just as impermanent as any of the other fabrications mentioned before. Sariputta remained free of attraction or aversion in regard to these qualities. He remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. Having perception of the dimensions of infinite space, the dimensions of nothingness, infinite consciousness, and neither perception nor non-perception, Sariputta understood there is deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized deeper concentration. Furthermore, Sariputta, having abandoned the perception of the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, he entered in those other ones. He entered and remained in the perception of perception and feelings. My comment. Sariputta now understands the foolishness of the ordinary and common distraction of attempting to establish a self in non-physical realms. Sariputta has recognized one fabricated mind state after another and is now free of perception or reactions rooted in views ignorant of Four Noble Truths. The Buddha continues, upon this realization, the qualities of a mind arising in grasping after cessation, greed, aversion, and delusion were completely abandoned. Fully mindful of this attainment, he regarded the impermanence of all of these past qualities. They arise, they become experience, and they pass away. I'll read my commentary here. Sariputta has attained a profound and penetrative understanding of three marks of existence and has developed awakened right view. Buddha continues, Sariputta remained independent, detached, released, dissociated, and free of any barriers arising from attraction or aversion. He now understood there is no deeper concentration. He pursued this path and realized there is no deeper concentration. If any person were to speak rightly and with skill, were to say Sariputta has attained mastery and perfection of noble virtue, noble concentration, and noble wisdom, those are the three characteristics of the Eightfold Path. Sariputta has attained mastery and perception of the threefold noble Eightfold Path and has attained noble release, or final release is another word for noble release. The Buddha continues, if any person were to speak rightly and with skill, were to say Sariputta is born of the Buddha's words, or you could say born of the Buddha's Dhamma. In this way, he is the Buddha's son, his own offspring. Sariputta is born of the Dhamma and has become awakened from the Dhamma. His inheritance is not of worldly things. His inheritance is of my Dhamma. Sariputta, my friends, has taken the wheel of the Dhamma set rolling by me and keeps it rolling in authenticity. This is what was said by the great teacher. Those gathered were delighted by his words. So am I. I hope you were too. Thank you. Isn't that a remarkable sutta? Do you all feel that way? I hope you do. It's the profound encouragement and inspiration in it, holding Sariputta out as an example, but yet describing his ultimate accomplishments in completely ordinary and achievable ways is really remarkable. Does anybody feel like you couldn't do what Sariputta did?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I know if that's fair.
I feel like there's a normal curve for anything, athletic performance, academics, so forth. And there must be one for meditation.
Mhm.
And there's some things I've done in my life that are maybe 2 standard deviations out. They're really rare. And this has got to be 3, 4, 5, 50 standard deviations out just one Buddha.
But many other, and he's using Sariputta and many other monks and nuns of the original Sangha that awakened. It wasn't just one awakened human being.
Yeah,
He taught many others to do the
I
same.
like listening to it. Like I like to go see the guys do the trick motorcycle ride. I can ride a motorcycle, and I like to see what somebody can do. That's not me.
What I would say, Drew, and I really appreciate you saying that and your honesty, is and the encouragement that the Buddha is giving all of us is that if you continue with this practice, you can develop this. But thank you for your answer. It was a fair answer. Bonnie, you had your hand up also?
I mean, I guess I have to work on my meditation and my concentration because just in the following, because I'm trying to take in one thought and then it's trying to figure out how blocks all put together and then I'm, what? So, I think someday it's like working to achieve to get to that place. And maybe I could achieve it for a second or a minute, like you say, you get to a certain level of meditation or to one of the jhanas, but it's sort of like as soon as you notice that, oh, I'm here, then you're not, so it's like it's why I guess we call it practice.
Yeah. So maybe a better way to ask the question is not, do you think you can achieve the ultimate goal? Does anybody feel that they can't do the practice as it's described? Anybody?
That is a better question.
It is a better, isn't it? Because there was an inherent little bit of grasping in the first way I asked it, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's a simple and direct practice that the Buddha taught. And one of the reasons why I'm giving this rather long series of jhanas is to make the point that this is something that each and every one of us can do. And the importance of the doing is to do it right, to do it the way the Buddha taught it. He didn't teach anything else. And to do it with the mindful recognition that it's actually bearing fruit, that there's practical benefits of this. So, Frank.
I saw the beginning of the sutta where he secluded himself for 2 weeks from sensual pleasures and whatever. So I saw it as abstinence from engaging in that stuff causes unskillful qualities to arise because you're not feeding that, and then it's through that insight into those impermanent nature of living that gave him insight into the qualities. And I saw like the 7 factors of awakening in those qualities of the jhanas.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's right. And that's Frank's describing also the importance of understanding and listening and learning the other factors, the other suttas that the Buddha teaches, including those 7 factors of awakening. The reference, though, to 2 weeks is the it took Sariputta 2 weeks to awaken once he met the Buddha and started practicing. We also have to remember that Sariputta and his buddy Moggallana were studying and doing many of the same practice that Siddhartha was prior to his awakening too.
But I see the seclusion from the normal world, like,
oh yeah,
like I have to do that at home. I have to do that for refuge. I have to pull away
yep.
to give myself a break so that I can get have insight into those factors that will keep me from awakening. Just the tendency for ill will to come up, like all those hindrances to come up. I see that all. Like I see the Anapanasati Sutta in there, like Matt was saying. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I see it as like a guide.
Yeah, it is, and all these talks on jhana are just like that. They're a guide to what to recognize as a useful meditation practice.
It's an example. It's
Yeah.
an example. He's part of the 3 gems as to show you that it is possible and it's nothing extraordinary. It just means that you need to develop that balance to see these insights, to develop that balance to be able to see it just as 5 aggregates.
Yep.
And to see clearly that how you live your life normally, you're it is a delusion. And all you're working toward is to see the reality of it and not get tricked into the illusions of normal everyday life. It's a
Yeah.
muscle. It's a muscle that you're building, and it has to be by practice. So if you just jump in, jump out, you'll have that experience of not thinking you can do it. But there's examples, and it's just not the second in command. It's a householder that
Yep.
there are examples out there. So it's doable, and it's your efforts. But it does teach you that you need to have a balance to the energy and joyousness of your practice.
Yeah.
So
And I think
Yeah, well, thank you. And you're also describing the integration of the Eightfold Path provides that middle way balance, doesn't it? And without the framework, it's hard to keep that balance there. And the audit, it's important to understand the ordinariness of jhana. When I first came across this, and in my mind, I still have these 3 teachers that taught jhana as this, like, I don't even know why they wasted their time teaching it, because they taught it as there's no way you can ever do this because it's so far advanced human beings, and then this long, elaborate description of what each level was. It's none of that. It's just an ordinary part of an extraordinary meditation practice. Helen, did you?
Well, what I was going to say was, I think one thing that makes it easier is if you take the judgment out of it.
The evaluation.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you were going through the sutta, I had this, because I think in pictures, as if you're on a train and you're looking out the window, and you're looking out the window and you see a cow, it's a cow. You see a pasture, it's a pasture. You see a barn, it's a barn. You see a city, it's a city. And it's just, it is what it is as you go through, and you're not judging, you're not sticking there, you're seeing it go by, and it's, and then sometimes there's just space or sky, and there's that peaceful feeling, and you're not saying, I forgot to count how many cows I saw, and you're not saying, did I find everything in every letter of the alphabet? You're not judging it, you're just, it's there, it is, it's there, it is, it's there, it is.
and he's not teaching you the trick motorcycle trick.
Yeah.
He's not. He's teaching you how to simply see what is reality of it.
In the most practical terms, and actually the most simple terms too, isn't it? And a beautiful picture, Helen. I love that. Because it's just a cow. But if it's that's a Guernsey, you just attach yourself to the cow. There's the eye making in it.
And then you go off on all the cows,
Yeah.
everything you know about a cow.
And you've just created a quality in your mind rooted in a fabrication that created disturbance and distraction instead of that pleasant abiding of cow, pasture, and
Yeah, and you're not,
When that stuff happens, you come back to the breath.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's in concentration.
but it's
But
also
in the
the
absence of that stuff, you have to cultivate something, and that's what the Eightfold Path is for.
yes, and it's the essence of what the Buddha taught as a second noble truth: craving for and clinging to, craving for something to be different than it is, more, less, or different. I want it to. I don't like Guernseys. It's got to be here for whatever.
Yeah.
Another. That's the. It seems almost insignificant. Why would we care about that? Because that's the essence of eye making. It's the essence of creating a disturbed mind. When we can be at peace with the Guernseys and the Herefords or it's a fox and I like any of that.
But you have to see that for yourself for your own awakening.
Yes, and that's what yes. And so the Buddha taught how to do it. In order to see it for yourself, your mind has to be in itself. It has to be united in its body. It can't be outside of itself. How could it do it then? It's not present for what's occurring. It's not present for the cow. And so we're really getting to some very subtle aspects of the Dhamma here. But do you see the more subtle your understanding is, the more simpler it is?
Yes.
But it's still a step by step thing.
Yeah, and what David.
No great leaps.
Yes,
If you take
it's
the
one after
judgment
another.
Out of it, you take the judgment out of it. you're not, this is good, this is bad, I did it, I didn't do it.
But I don't think that you take it out of it. I think it falls away. I think judgment falls away.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, like you're not letting go of something, it's letting go of you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's another aspect of a well-concentrated mind. And in that way, you can see that the other 7 factors of the Eightfold Path are there to guide you to recognize fabrications and let them fall away. On that note, let's just go. Let's go around the room. Start with Lorna. Lorna, good to see you. Sure.
Good to see you.
I'll see you, Brett. Donna dinner, November 20th.
Nice, Brad.
Donna dinner, November 20th. Donna dinner, November 20th. There's some info on the website too about it. It's great to see you again, Joe. Blow off class next week too. Get home safe, Frank. Say hello to Eric, please. Lorna.
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
You mentioned one thing which I didn't relate to at all, which was you mentioned you think about you're in debt to your thoughts, or you feel indebted to your thoughts.
In debt to ignorance.
I didn't get that at all.
Then forget it. If we're constantly doing things in our life that ignore our own ignorance, we remain, using the word in debt is just another way of saying we're clinging to it. We're stuck to our ignorance. And we are creating a thought, word, or deed that is rooted in ignorance, then creates a debt to that ignorance. In other words, it's another way of explaining karma, that our next moment is going to be rooted in that ignorance because we have that debt to pay. We created it in ourselves. Does that explain it?
Yeah.
And actually, I think it was a pretty good line now that I think about it. So now we'll go to Lorna. I'm glad you're here tonight.
As far as my own practice is going, I think I am getting a lot out of it. One of the reasons I'm benefiting is that when I do my meditation at home, I feel that I could just naturally extend the period of time that I meditate. If I, set the clock for 30 minutes or something like that. The 30 minutes is up. I feel like I can just sit in meditation just for the enjoyment of it.
For the pleasant abiding.
Yes, for the pleasant abiding. You can have a thought that I can either open my eyes and go about my day and get distracted again, or I can just sit here a bit longer and enjoy it. It's like taking another 5 minutes in bed or something,
And so do you?
Yes, I do. Yes, but the thing is, it's in a very natural way. It's not like I'm timed. I'm not trying to build my time up and all that sort of stuff. It's just I can just sit and enjoy more of it. Maybe I should enjoy more of it, but just enjoy it. So that's one way I've sort of noticed that I've benefited.
Yeah. It took you a while, though.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to see, it's always difficult to describe what the Buddha teaches to somebody who doesn't know what the Buddha, as we know. I'm beginning to see or explain it to myself that the Buddha taught the truth of life, the truth of how life is, without our own, and we see life without our own personal input of.
And isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, and so I'm beginning to see more and more that the Buddha taught the truth of life.
Yeah.
The real truth of life.
That's right. Yeah.
Through that way.
Yeah. He taught it as 4 noble truths.
Yes, but the truth about life.
Yeah.
That when you're caught up in your fabrications and your own thinking, and it's just a thought. It's not the truth. It's not happening. It's not worth getting carried away with.
Yeah.
It's just a thought. It's not the truth. It's not happening. It's only happening in your head.
Yeah.
And everything. And the difference of seeing that is what the Buddha taught to me, is becoming that way.
That's remarkable insight. Thank you. Matt, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you. Good to be here with everybody. Really like this. Really good series. And just sort of tying in, I think, a little bit of what Frank said and a little bit of what Lorna just said, is that when you practice shamatha vipassana, which in its most basic way is practicing restraint.
Yeah.
Jhana naturally arises. It's natural. It's a natural thing. Naturally happens.
Yeah.
Naturally, meaning we don't have to fabricate it. It's just, it's natural. There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. It's right there.
Recognize it.
Recognize it. So that sutta really, it's like Russian dolls with the restraint thing. You know, inside the restraint of being on retreat for 2 weeks. Just we'll play with that image. Sariputta in retreat for 2 weeks, practicing restraint. Inside of sitting in shamatha vipassana, which is practicing restraint. Inside that is fabrications, even things that we consider like calm, joyful, pleasant abiding. All of those things didn't attract him or create attraction or aversion. So again, practicing restraint. And naturally what arose was first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. They were just naturally there when restraint was applied through shamatha vipassana. So it's just a really complete teaching there in this series. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Glad you're here tonight. It is that act of just disentangling from the world, finding seclusion, and be mindful of your breath is the ultimate restraint, isn't it? You're insisting that for this moment I will not be distracted by fabrication. Ron, good to see you tonight.
Thank you for teaching this series. It was high time.
Yeah.
And as I said before, I'm realizing how much I spend in long meditation. I'm still finding out things that not this way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually surprised how much wrong meditation I'm capable of after doing it for so long. And I remember, like, even I think this was probably the first retreat that I did, and one of the things I talked to you about was, oh God, this meditation thing, Jesus.
I remember
just
that
can't
talk.
do it. Just can't do it. It's not working. And that's still playing out, strangely enough. But I have a practice, and it is slowly starting to work.
Thank you. What's most significant is the right effort that was there all along.
Mm-hmm.
And that continues to this day, bearing fruit. Yeah. Thank you. Andrew, good to see you tonight. How are you?
Good evening. Well, night.
Good.
This has been helpful to understand how an enlightened person has experienced this. I can't say that I've gotten beyond the second jhana. First and second, I kind of wavered between two, but I haven't recognized exactly what it is that third sense. Maybe I have, I just haven't associated it.
Yeah.
I have to mention one very peculiar thing is that when I'm breathing correctly and there are no distracting thoughts, I'm aware of that. And my left earlobe just vibrates.
Wow.
And then when it stops vibrating, my mind is going off someplace else. And then when I start to refocus focus on the breath, left ear lobe vibrates. So that's a kind of state of realization, but it's also an analysis. I'm analyzing the fact that, oh, I might be number 2 at this point. It's a wonderful feeling, but it's my body telling me that I am actually concentrating on the breathing. It's just a natural occurrence.
That's outstanding, Andrew. And the elephant ear sutta. But it takes a certain measure of concentration to notice that it's vibrating.
Never the right one.
Thank you. Right. And what is important is that you're recognizing that concentration is deepening. That's the whole point. I'm glad you made it tonight. Helen, good to see you.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Very good. For me, something that I have been working on lately is really identifying the mental fabrication, during meditation, but also today.
Yeah.
A lot of effort. The fabrication from the fact, or just the unworthiness of even spending time with a mental health. So that's helped out a lot in rises there. In reality, has no meaning or bearing.
And again, you're getting to some very deep and subtle aspects of the Dhamma and the cause of all suffering. Dependent origination says from ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrication. So recognizing and abandoning, or as Frank says, just letting the fabrications fall away is so important, but they have to be recognized. We need a framework for doing it. Thank you. David, good to see you tonight.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I think there's one person online, so it's probably Mary. We can all say hello to Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary. Wish you were here.
Wish you were here. Bonnie, good to see you. Where? Yeah, what she told me. Where is she? Yeah. This isn't bad here, though. Good to see you, Bonnie.
My meditations are, I'm not sure if it's that I'm getting to other jhanas, but I know I'm concentrating more on my breath, but I also know I'm concentrating less on this. And so that when you say, I'm aware of my body and you realign our thinking for the last 5 minutes, I'm not sure today that I even heard you call back. Right, and maybe I heard one call back. So that the passage of time feels like when we're saying we can sit for a longer time, I think that it felt passage. Started with the passage of time.
You're describing the third jhana. That's what that is. Good, thank you. Liz, good to see you. We missed you recently.
Yes. What's happening is that I'm just thinking about it all the time. And I think about it, and I'm in the process of, those restraint words needs to be used. So I don't know if I've recognized the different stages of the jhana so that I think about what I want. It's distracting.
That's worth the price of admission too, isn't it? A little less distracted. And it's an aspect of pleasant abiding to have your thoughts framed by the Dhamma. What it is. That's living in reality. Thank you, Liz. Russ, good to see you tonight. How are you?
Well,
Good.
just appreciate learning about levels of meditation. To concentrate. Concentration. Those are getting longer.
That's outstanding. Thank you. Glad you're here tonight. Like I said, I think this concludes our series on jhana. But I will give another talk on the sutta on Saturday. Dana dinner's coming up. I just put a flyer up. There's a basket out there for donations to help offset Julie's cost at Love and Oven. One of the things that let me back up a little bit. I emailed, there was actually 15 first responder companies that came to the Galasso fire. I emailed every one of them today, inviting them. I emailed Mayor Meyer. He said he's coming. And I emailed the 6 borough council members. I haven't heard back from them, but and told all of them to bring family, friends, etc. So there's probably going to be about 450 people on the dinner. Who knows how many of those are going to show up, but they're invited. Julie asked, it was a good idea, that those of you that get free hams or turkeys from your shopping clubs, whatever it might be. What is it?
From ShopRite.
Yeah, from ShopRite. There's other, I don't know if other stores do. Anyway, if you get free hams, turkeys, etc., that you can't use and you would just leave in the store, please take it and we'll give it to Julie so she can cook it for the
Well, that's a great idea.
expected big gathering. And if not, if they don't use it, then we'll disperse it. Probably bring it to Ottsville to the food bank out there. But anyway, so please do that. I guess we're going to have to coordinate that. If when probably the best thing to do would be to be able to bring it to Love and Oven maybe Sunday before Sunday the 18th. But I'll talk to Julie. But so let me know if you have turkeys or hams or anything else along those lines. I could use some help with just some logistics. We need to get 3 or 4 folding tables, 6 or 8 foot tables that can be brought there and brought back that Tuesday night. If somebody can help with getting some soft drinks and water, I typically get about 6 of, I think they're liter bottles of water, of soda, and maybe a case of soda, case of water, and some ice, and paper or plastic serving stuff for 150 or so people, maybe 200 this year. So if you can do that, please let me know. And, I don't expect one person to do all of that, but I just can't do it anymore. I'm getting old. I can't see and don't walk so good anymore. So I could use some help in those logistics. So if you can help with any of that, please get back to me, and we'll just organize it that way.
Would you be able to post a list of those things and then we can know? I only remember some of what you just said.
Yeah, you know what I'll do? I did put it in Thursday's email, the things that we need. So maybe as someone emails me and says, I got this covered, I'll just cross it off that list.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Or else we'll end up with
And then you'll
A lot of
repost the list after it across the piece. Otherwise, we don't know.
Oh yeah. I'll you know what I'll do? I'll put it online so you don't have to wait till the next email.
Yeah.
What we need. There's a page right now, and I think it's called Dana Dinner, that has those things listed. And as they're not needed anymore, I'll just cross them off. But if you decide you can do the tables, let me know, and I'll just take it off the list. But I really could use some help, and please tell as many people as you can about this. I can't get a hold. I can't find Guido, Romeo, or Joe's contact info. So if anybody knows how to get a hold of,
What I heard was they were absorbed by another pizza chain and they moved out of the area.
really,
That's what I heard. Don't know or that's what I
I
heard.
mean, Glossos,
Yeah,
that they're not coming back.
that's what I heard.
Ah, boy, talk about impermanence. Wow. Well, again, if anybody knows how to get a hold of him so we can make sure of that, and we could still invite him maybe for a farewell. Oh, that's too bad. I like their pizza and their other food.
How about the owner of
The cafe.
cafe?
Yeah. Does anybody know who that? I hardly ever went in there, so I don't know them.
Rosalie?
Rosalie.
Rosalie.
If anybody knows how to get a hold of,
She's at the
She's a pizza.
Sky Cafe at the airport in Pittston.
That's our second location.
That's her second restaurant.
Yeah, we could reach her through there.
okay, could anybody take that up and then let me know that it got done, and even with Guido, Romeo, and Joe, I'd really appreciate that.
Give you contact information.
Yeah.
Is there a merchants association?
There's a Frenchtown website.
Business association.
Business association.
Yeah, we can find it that way. But.
So are you a member of that?
Yeah, I could contact Caroline and ask her if she has those guys contact her. I'll take care of that.
Okay, all right, so that's done. You'll get a hold of Guido and Rosalie? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Rosaria or something like that.
okay, good. Yeah. All right, boy, great class. Any other questions or comments? Okay, as the Buddha said, go find the root of a tree or an empty hut and do jhana.
Or an empty truck.
You're an empty truck away from the goose. Ram sent me a picture of Mara the goose, and that is one fierce goose.
Yeah, she looks completely nuts.
Yeah. Wow.
They're sticking out everywhere. Bizarre thing.
We'll conclude with metta as we always do. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture. Gently close your eyes, gently close your mouths, and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.
Thanks.